variations, not just from people within our church, but just people in general, especially when they find out I'm religious, I like work at a church, which is kind of like, if I don't necessarily believe in God, or if I don't necessarily think Christianity is the only true way, like Jesus is a cool guy, but, why should I go to church? Is a question that I think that I get a fair amount. And, I think for some people, even in our church right now, might be thinking, oh, I'm in a place where I'm unsure about my faith. Thus, I'm not sure if church is the right space for me. And I want to give a shout out to Michael Dossier. I don't know if that's how you say his last name, actually. But thank you for allowing me to use your question for today's Theology Thursday. So the way, I think maybe some context that might be helpful just in understanding why some people might have this question is a couple of things. One, but I think the most predominant reason is that a lot of us who grew up in a conservative church, our adherence to Christianity was because we believed it was the only right way. Every other way brought you to hell, and this was the only way to heaven. So it was very clear, this is why I should be Christian, because that's how I avoid hell, go to heaven. But if you drop that sort of heaven, hell understanding of Christianity, or at least you reframe that, and if you even have a less exclusive understanding of Christianity in which you acknowledge, some of the validity and legitimacy of other faiths, which I think we do here at Forefront, even though we're very grounded in the Christian faith, then the kind of begs the question, why be Christian? I don't have the same previous reasons I used to be Christian. I've heard it. But now I'm so progressive, I'm not sure if I should be Christian. It's a bit of that question. So I want to talk, and I think, I don't think the answer for everyone is going to be church, not necessarily even our church. Maybe a Unitarian church might make more sense. Maybe no church makes more sense, whatever it is. But I'm going to just present some reasons, I think, why church, I think, is a really valuable space to be in. And the Christian faith, I think, is very in many ways a beautiful one. But even if you don't believe in God, even if you don't think Christianity is the only right religion, what have you. So let's assume the person I'm thinking about is, like I said, someone who doesn't quite believe in God, doesn't believe Christianity is the right way, but let's say like some of the values of a more progressive Christian faith, values around empathy and service and loving your neighbor and stuff like that. So, and obviously that everyone is inherently worthy of dignity and love and stuff. So the way I like to think about it is, I think it is probably possible for a few people to just have those beliefs. I should love other people. I'm inherently worthy, and just repeat them to yourself every morning when you wake up out of bed, and just carry on with your life. You might not necessarily need a religious structure to affirm those beliefs about yourself, about others. For most people, though, just wake up every morning and just repeating those mantras is not going to be enough. You need that weekly reminder for 2 hours where someone and you're singing songs, you're immersed in stories and rituals that remind you that my life is not just about me. I'm here in part to serve others, and to remind you that no matter what you do, that will never take away who you are as a person, your worth as a person, how beloved you are as a person. I think the fact is that we are, we're not just brains, we're bodies, we're hearts, we're emotions that need that reinforcement and that remind on a weekly basis. And it's really helpful that that reminder comes not just in me listening to, a good podcast, or me reading a great book that's like a kind of like pump up book, or a book about like how to be justice oriented. But I'm doing this weekly thing with other people who are committed to a shared values and committed to a shared direction. And not only am I doing this with other people, we're actually going to engage in some physical activities together to remind us that this is what we're here to do. We're going to take communion together. We're going to sing together. We're going to clap together. And this is a bit more applicable for in person, but some parallels from online as well. And these things are not just communal and corporate, they are physical. They remind us that we have bodies that consume, the grape juice, bodies that consume bread, bodies that clap and sing and dance. I think so much of our work lives tend to be like, for some of us, purely mental. I'm just here typing at a laptop. And then, we use our bodies maybe at the gym, but it's always like, for productive reasons. You're here to like produce and get better. Here is a form of physicality, getting in touch with your body, that's just purely for expression and joy and communion, which is beautiful. And I think that brings me to my another point, which is that in most spaces we show up in the world, for most of us, that's going to be our jobs, our work. And even outside of jobs, there is this constant sense, I think, that we are going to be measured by how much we produce or what output we create. So and that is just an intangible thing that even if you have the nicest bosses in the world, you're spending 9 to 6, every day immersed in that space where you are some ways judged by your production, by your capacities, by your work ethic. And then your off hours, you're basically sleeping. So I think church is a rare space where you can just be at, and you can walk in without any worry about performance or productivity, that you are going to be greeted at the door. Hopefully you'll be given a bagel without any questions asked. Did you pay? No one's going to ask you, did you bring any money to get for the bagel? You can walk into the doors of most churches and no one will really give you too hard of time, like I said, for the most part, if you have certain privileges. But, and I think that's like a very beautiful space. There aren't that many public spaces in the city or in general where you can just walk in, you'll be greeted, you'll be accepted, you'll hopefully be, treated well, without you need to do anything. You could be completely silent. You could be, whatever condition. So I think that's a beautiful space to just always be in and be remembered. Like, I'm here regardless of my productivity, regardless of, how much I produce. I'm just as accepted and welcome as anyone else. And I think it's an important ritual for us, in some ways to combat the cultural rituals of capitalism. Because outside of church, in the workplace, like I said, it's just going to be that message over and over again. And then I think very last two things is, I think churches are also a rare space, in particular progressive churches, where people are able to be engaged on a heart level, a head level, and an action level, where you might get a sermon that's about like dealing with insecurity and grief and doubt, and uncertainty, and it's very like targeted to it's like, how are you feeling, how are you doing right now? Or you may get a sermon that's about like your relationship with your parents, your relationship with your family, or coworker, or roommates, or loved ones, and working through some of those dynamics of, guilt or obligation or conflict or expectations, what have you. Or you might get a sermon that is about just you in society, you as a member of society, you as a person of certain racial group, certain class, you as an American, you as a Christian, and you're and I think it's very rare to have spaces that touch people on all three levels. Most spaces, I think, engage with just one or two levels. So your therapist mostly engages with you as your own person, and maybe a little bit of you and other people. If you go to a very sort of social justice organizing space, it's mostly about you as a societal actor and maybe a bit of you interpersonally, but it's not a ton of more internal hard work that is being done. Of course, I think spaces that are really excellent and able to operate all three registers. Some of the great kind of organizers who are talking about like, abolishing police and stuff like that, really also make a point to mention that we first have to start with abolishing the cop in our head. The person that polices us and regulates us and punishes us if we do something wrong or for what have you, like the punitive, if you want to undo a punitive understanding of crime and treating other people, we have to start first with the ways in which we punish ourselves. So I think, as well to say that I don't think church is the exclusive monopoly on this treatment, but I do think it does, at its best, is one of the spaces that does that well. And I think the very last thing is, and this is maybe a bit more true to the Christian church as opposed to just another religious space, but I really do think that church is just such a unique sociological space. Like I said, it does depend on what church you're in, and how diverse it is. But at least when it comes to forefront, I think we have a rare space where we have real estate developers sitting next to tenant organizers, and people who are born and raised in New York sitting next to someone who just moved here at age 25. From, obviously there are ways in which we can be more diverse and we can be better, but I still think for the most part, given how segregated and homogenous, frankly, most of our social spaces are, most of our families are, most of our workspaces are, church is just such a rare and awesome opportunity to be able to break outside of your bubble and learn about someone else's experience and or automatically have something in common. Something in common you can talk about, or any of this common potential identity you share that gives you a shared foundation from which to build and be more empathetic about each other's experiences. So, those are my general thoughts. And obviously, I have not even mentioned Jesus and how awesome we think Jesus is, and the life of Jesus, and the ways in which we think so much of Scripture and church history really calls us to do great things that are about love and service, and that really remind us that we are loved also. But that stuff I think we cover usually in our sermons. I wanted to cover another slightly different perspective. Let's see if there are any comments or questions. And if not, that's basically all I have to say. Sam, do you have any thoughts? Oh, okay. All right. So I don't see, let me see if there's a comment. No comment that I see so far. So, awesome. Okay. Let's just leave it at that. And thank you for tuning in to Theology Thursday. Hopefully that was helpful for you in thinking about what is the value of church. And if you notice, like I was very specific in how I worded it. My question was like, why be part of a church? I didn't say why be Christian per se. Ultimately, I think the identity of a Christian is personally for me, it's more about me signaling the I belong to. This is the tribe, more, for better or for worse, that I'm attached to. That's always going to be my home base. It's always going to speak deeply to me and be really resonant with me. And so it's out of that the identification comes first and foremost. But, I think I could very well see a case in which you might not necessarily identify as Christian, but you still are committed to be part of a church. I think that would be, in my opinion, fine. But that's just mostly me. Thanks, Mackenzie, for listening. She commented.